call this meeting back to order, and we can just keep the volume down, guys, a little bit. Welcome to meeting number 133 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. The committee's meeting today to discuss committee business. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to Standing Order 15.1. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the members. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to interpreters and cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback is an earpiece worn too close to the microphone. We therefore ask all participants to exercise a high degree of caution when handling the earpieces, especially when your microphone or your neighbor's microphone is turned on. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing health of interpreters, I invite participants to ensure that they speak into the microphone into which their headset is plugged in, and to avoid manipulating the earbuds by placing them on the table away from the microphone when they are not in use. Reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. I do see MP Baker's hand up. I just want to, members, for one of our colleagues here, MP Daniel Blaikie, the member from Elwood Transcona. This will be his last meeting here at Finance, and his last day probably here at Parliament. And we just want to, on behalf of the committee, but others may speak to this, just want to thank him for all his hard work, for your collegiality, for everything that you've brought to this committee, and to our many reports. We thank you for all of the work that you have done, Daniel. And we do wish you all the best with your future endeavors, and those future endeavors, I think, will intersect here again with Parliament. And we look forward to seeing you here as a friend and colleague. So thank you so much. And now I am going to go. I've got speakers at MP Baker.
So, Chair, I did want to say something on the topic of Mr. Blaikie, but I also wanted to, if I could, get in the queue for the committee business as well.
Okay.
Is this on this, or is this on committee business?
Well, I just wanted to say those opening remarks about our colleague Daniel, but I'm sure you can. I think you can speak to both if you want, if you'd like. Yeah.
Sure, if that's okay with members.
I just
want to make sure I wasn't preempting what other members want to talk about.
Okay.
So I just wanted to echo the chair's comments. I think we've all of us have, especially in this committee, have gotten to know Daniel pretty well, Mr. Blaikie really well, and as a strong advocate for his constituents. But I think also someone who's very, very thoughtful and very grounded, and I think in his principles and what he believes needs to be done on behalf of his constituents and on behalf of Canadians. And I think sometimes with all of the various pressures that members face in this place and input we get and advice we get, it's easy to lose that grounding. And I think Mr. Blaikie is someone who I think is very, very grounded. And that doesn't mean we agree on everything, but I know that when he's speaking from a place of principle and on behalf of his constituents primarily, but Canadians that he cares deeply about. I would also say that I've had the opportunity over the past couple of months, I would say, to work more closely with Daniel and really have appreciated his collaboration. And the last thing I'll say is that I think we've all witnessed him in the House chamber quite a bit over the years, and I think one of the reactions from some of my colleagues when they learned that Daniel wasn't going to be staying here with us was that it was a loss for the House. And so I'll leave it with that. It's a loss for the House and it's a loss for our committee. And we thank you for your service and we wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very kind and very nice. Thank you, MP Baker. And you want to also speak to your...
The motion of
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I wanted to do I would like at the last meeting.
Sorry, can we put Yvonne? We'll put him first after. I think it would be nice if we just go around on Blaikie.
That's why I asked that question.
Exactly. All right. So that's a sequence. So sure.
You want to go, or should I? You want to go, Marty?
Well, as the only fellow Manitoban on this committee,
right.
I want to wish Daniel all the best. I did give him some marching orders when he gets back and has a chance to chat with Premier Canoe. I said make sure he cuts more taxes and particularly makes that gas tax cut permanent. And I know Daniel feels the same way I do, and he'll make sure that occurs. But aside from that. Look, I very much appreciate working with Daniel. He is a person of character and just an all-around nice guy, and he's pretty smart too. So we wish him well in Manitoba, and I'm sure we'll be crossing paths again in the future. All the best in your future endeavors, Daniel.
Thank you. Thanks, Marty, for that on Daniel. And I see MP Chambers.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
And I've got MP Samaria, and I apologize, MP Samaria,
excellent.
after on the screen.
I've only been here I'm in my third year, but it was nice to start, and we were right into it with a financial piece of legislation, and one of the things that brought us together was a shared value of making sure that publicly traded companies didn't get the benefit of the wage subsidy if they paid dividends. And I use that as an example all the time where we've worked together on something, and that's not the only circumstance, of course, but I appreciate collaboration and open to collaboration that you bring to the place, and I think it's a good model for people to follow. I'm a bit nervous about what happens to the committee after this, Mr. Chair, losing somebody who was able to bridge many gaps that we have here, so that's a good lesson or maybe a challenge for us, and perhaps big shoes to fill for whoever follows you. But it's been a pleasure in a very short time to have you here, and I think you've advanced a number of great causes. And while we might not have you here at committee, I know that you will likely still be meeting with the Minister of Finance, and I'm sure she'll be very, very pleased to see you continue to walk in that door as she is when she sees you here. So wish you all the best. Like to say we may see you back here someday, and look forward to that potentially.
MP Saint-Marie, please.
Oui, merci.
Thank you, and hi, Daniel. Thank you for all the work you've done in the Chamber and also in the committee. As Adam was saying, you are the Jedi when it comes to getting beyond our impasses in the committee. Are we going to be stuck in a never-ending filibuster from now on? Or are we going to stick to the flying pigs that you've given to us now and again to help us out? So you brought a great deal to the Chamber and the committee. Your commitment, your social commitment in politics is based on good values. You really care about the fate of the ordinary man and woman in the street to improve their lot. You work in a pragmatic, realistic way, coming up with practical solutions. So I take off my hat to you. Now you're going to have new challenges working with the new Premier in Manitoba. I think he's the most exciting one in Canada at the moment in terms of Premier, so I think that's going to be great. And, of course, be close to your family. It's not easy when our family's in the riding and we're in Ottawa. It's big sacrifices when we can't see our kids as much. And as other colleagues have said, I imagine that perhaps we will cross paths again in the Chamber. You'll be really all guns firing, so it'll be a real privilege for us to see you then. And to round off, I'd like to say that you are the embodiment of the Canadian left, close to the unions, close to the ordinary people, and ready to apply yourself to specific points on the ground to make a difference. So you have my full respect. And I'll cite what we've said for another politician in the past. With your constructive and firm approach, with your well-anchored values, you are a force tranquille, a quiet force in the Parliament and within your political party. So we're really going to miss you and all the very best. Come back and see us, and do contact us if we can continue to collaborate in one way or another. And bravo, my friend.
Gabrielle, and now MP Morris would like to say a few words. Yeah, okay.
Well, I may be a guest to this committee, but I get the privilege of sitting next to Mr. Blakey in the House. And what I notice every day working with Daniel is that because he speaks from the heart, he commands the respect of those he works with wherever he goes. And I think that's been heard in comments from others this morning. Daniel, it's a big part of why you'll be missed here as a voice for workers, as a voice for people, as a voice for Canadians. I will certainly miss you and wish you all the very best.
Mike, I do have you, Daniel. You'll be the final speaker as you have the floor, but I do have MP Lawrence and then MP Howland, and then I think then we'll go to MP Blakey.
Thank you. Just quickly echo the comments of Yvonne and Marty. Daniel is no doubt a man of the highest character and is a person of integrity and is true to his principles as a social democrat there. And I'll just be brief because all of the great comments have been made, but I'd just like to thank his wife and his children for sharing him with Parliament for the last 8 years. And we might come back for him at some point, so just a warning.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. And now to MP Howland.
Thank you, Chair. Daniel, thank you. I know we disagreed on very little, but I will say that I respect how you elevated the debate, not just in the House, but in here. Made us think about things that maybe we wouldn't have thought about, and how you always stuck to your principles, whether we agreed with them or not, but I show you a high degree of respect for that. And from someone else, I also come from the construction background. I do want to thank you for always raising the voice for workers, and I'm wishing you and your family the best. I'd also like for you to advocate on behalf of the Conservative Party with Premier Canoe, if he would be willing to join the other premiers in calling on the government to spike the hike. But once again, I want to thank you for your dedication and your sacrifice, and more importantly to your family for their sacrifice in lending you to Parliament to elevate the debate in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz. And now we are going to go to MP Blake, and we do want to thank the Blakey family and all those that are here. And we're all friends of Daniel, so that being here to hear these kind words for a great member. Yeah. Daniel.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all my colleagues for those kind words. I would also like to say a big thank you to my family, my wife and kids and mother who are here in Ottawa today on what is a pretty big day, not just for me, but for them too. And I really do appreciate all the kind words. I think I have to say, I mean, to the extent that I've worked very hard to be collaborative and to accomplish things with other people, none of that success would be possible without all the other people that I've had the opportunity to work with. And so I thank all of you for the times that we've been able to get past our disagreements. Of course, Parliament is a place where people come to disagree. So a certain amount of disagreement is normal, but it can sometimes get in the way of progress and us doing the things that I think we're summoned here to do by Canadians. So I'm grateful to all of you for the times that we've been able to overcome those disagreements after some what I hope and in the best instances have been constructive debate to get to doing the thing that really matters. So thank you to all of you, not just for the kind words, but for the collaboration as well. Merci, Monsieur Sainte-Marie, pour les bons mots aussi et pour votre travail.
Thank you for your kind words and everything you've said. I really appreciate it.
I could spend time talking about each and every one of you around the table. We wouldn't have any time left for business, which of course is why we're here. So thanks again, like I say, for the words and for the work, and I wish you all the best success after I'm gone in continuing to do that work and focusing on the things that really matter.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Yes, thank you for helping us find that common ground. And now I'm going to... All right. He's still here. He's still here. Okay. And now we've got to get through some committee business, and it's we've got a short amount of time. The window is small. So MP Baker, please.
I'll be brief. So in our last meeting, I gave notice of a motion. I wanted to move that motion now. I'll just read it to remind folks. that in accordance with its motion adopted on January 30th, 2024, the chair be instructed to schedule meetings for the consideration of Bill C-59 upon the bill's referral to committee, that clause-by-clause consideration of the bill start no later than April 30th, 2024, following a total of 20 hours of witness testimony. For the purposes of this study, that the chair be empowered to set up extended meetings and request additional House resources if necessary. My brief comments are basically that it's a pretty straightforward motion. We set out 20 hours worth of time for study, which is, I think, a reasonable period of time. We set a date for clause by clause to make sure we leave a reasonable period of time to make sure we do the study, but also so that we get to the business at hand and to the other business that the committee needs to carry out.
Okay, thanks, MP Baker. I do have MP Chambers.
I just want to make sure I get on the record before Rick Perkins comes in to take over for me. But I've been inspired. I've been inspired by my friend Daniel Blakey, so I think I might be persuaded to vote for this motion. So just want to. It's in the spirit of collaboration.
Yeah, listen, I'm inspired myself. Listen, it's we have a lot of enlightenment going on here. So I've got MP Blakey's on next.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's just a couple things that I'd like to propose, I think, to improve the motion. I don't have exact wording necessarily hammered out for an amendment, but just a couple principles. I think we should say no less than 20 hours, because I think if we're able to do more hours of study, that's better. I know we've hit around the 20-hour mark on budget implementation acts in this Parliament, but I think being able to exceed that is better given the size of those bills. I think that we should exclude from that 20 hours the appearance by the minister and departmental officials. It'd be nice. I think we need to make more room, or as much room as possible, for voices of Canadian stakeholders in the course of the study. And I would suggest, and of course it's going to be up to the committee to decide, and it'll be the committee doing the work in this case, and I won't be around for it, but I think that to do it with 1 hour panels with a witness from each party would be a good way to do it. 20 hours that way would mean up to 80 witnesses that are not government officials, which I think gives the committee a lot of room to be able to hear from a wide cross-section of Canadian voices. So those are the three improvements that I would suggest. As I say, I don't have that in writing, but I hope that that's clear enough that it might be sufficient for the deliberation of the committee.
Okay, well, thank you for that, MP Blakey. I've got MP Lawrence next to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you. So just a brief comment here. Conservatives would support all of those ideas.
Okay. MP Baker?
We'll support that.
And you'll support that also? Okay. All right. Okay, the magic is happening. So we have unanimous. Okay, and all right. So there is quickly. So I see unanimous consent for this. Okay, so we'll move forward with that. Okay, so we have agreement.
And Daniel Blakey must stay for the 20 hours.
All right. So we have. Did you raise your hand, MP Lawrence?
So
Yep.
just as a point of order, like I said, in concept, we support all of those.
Yeah.
We would like to see it in writing before we agree upon. Is that the clerk do that up quickly?
By the end of the meeting.
Sure.
Okay, by the end of the meeting, we can get something in writing, I guess. Add to that. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So in principle, everybody is in agreement, and then by the end of the meeting, we'll have it in writing. Okay. I've got MP Blakey.
I mean, Mr. Chair, that we're suspending debate on that motion until the end of the meeting, and that there may be an opportunity to, for instance, move that the committee now consider the motion I had moved, and then we had adjourned a meeting.
It's your prerogative to do that right now.
Okay, well, I would so move that we go back to my previous motion, which, for the information of the committee, was given that the Canadian grocery sector made more than $6 billion in profit in 2023, and that millions of Canadians have reported food insecurity in the last year, the Standing Committee on Finance call on the government to immediately take action by implementing an excess profit tax on large grocery companies that would put money back in the people's pocket with a GST rebate and establish a national school food program, and that this motion be reported to the House.
for us to resume discussion. MP, just one clarification there. So, MP Blakey, you do need to just ask the committee that we would resume discussion on this motion. If you can do that.
Yeah, so
Yep.
if we're agreed that we can go straight to the motion, I think that's a great thing.
Okay. And there
For
is
the time we
agreement
have
for that?
remaining.
There is agreement, yeah. Okay. Is there any discussion on this?
$6 billion.
Yeah, okay. MP Zerowitz? We've got a few minutes, and then we've got the minister coming in here, so.
I'll just mention something very quickly. In general, you've touched on, I think, an issue that just about every Canadian is thinking about. It doesn't matter if you have no money, if you have some money, everybody's noticing how expensive grocery prices are. And so I would say a couple things. In general, I don't like these mechanisms of putting additional taxes onto our businesses. I want them to be able to do their work. I do, though, and I do appreciate our government has done quite a bit in terms of trying to increase competition, which is really the right way to go about providing the right incentives for the grocery sector to actually be behaving well. But in the absence of that, and while we're waiting for a lot of our new competition policy elements to go in, I know I'd be very open to be supporting this motion. So I know we'll be discussing this, I think, a little bit more later, but just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, MP Zerowitz. MP Lawrence.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And certainly we, as Conservatives, agree that there's an affordability crisis in Canada. And as we've seen, record numbers of food bank usage, 2 million Canadians or more, with an additional million expected, I believe, this year in food bank usage. In addition to that, we also now have a dumpster diving Facebook group, and I believe it's Toronto, with over 8,000 different members. The cost of food has never been higher in Canada, and it's never been so far out of reach. We're also facing a productivity crisis, and this has gotten to the point where nearly all economists are now talking about Canada's productivity crisis. We've even got international attention now from economists and those who comment on the business community with our sputtering GDP per capita. I think that there is a very easy solution to reducing the cost of food. And that is to reduce the carbon tax or eliminate the carbon tax. And instead, we are increasing the cost of the carbon tax. Of course, carbon tax is not just put on the end user. The carbon tax is put on our farmers who of course, plant and harvest our crops as they utilize their tractors, and then also those who truck our food and who take it across there. So there's carbon tax on multiple levels on that. We've now seen that the PBO has told us that even with the Canada carbon rebate, have I got that right there, guys, on the Liberal side? The Canada carbon rebate. Okay, I want to make sure I get branding right. That there is a net loss in every province where the backstop applies. So in Ontario, it's about $600. In Alberta, it's $1,000. I believe it's even a net negative in Manitoba. And if I were going to be an advisor on intergovernmental relations, that might be where I might start talking with respect to that. So certainly Conservatives have been active in agreement that there needs to be a greater competition, but there's a very simple solution, and that is to spike the hike and axe the tax. Thanks.
Thank you, MP Lawrence. I do have MP Samari, but MP Samari, I will have to end this in 1 minute. So, okay, go ahead.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Just to inform the members of the committee that I'm in favour of the motion, but I will bring one amendment. Given that education is a provincial jurisdiction, I will move an amendment, which I'm not going to give just now, to remind you that Quebec will be working with full compensation, so I'll bring it back later, but otherwise I agree with the rest of the motion. Thank you.
And if you can send that maybe to the clerk. Thank you. Ended for the transition to the minister. pursuant to the order of reference on Monday, March 18th, 2024, and the motion adopted on Monday, December 11th, 2024, the committee is meeting to discuss Bill C-59, an act to implement certain provisions of the Fall Economic Statement tabled in Parliament on November 21st, 2023, and certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 28th, 2023. And with us today, we have the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Welcome, Minister. And joining the Minister is the Deputy Minister of the Department of Finance, Mr. Chris Forbes. Welcome. And we look forward to hearing your remarks and for you answering the questions from the members. And Minister, I'm sure you already know that one of our colleagues here from our committee and from Parliament will. This will be his last day here on this committee, and that is MP Daniel Blaikie. So, Minister, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, I do know that it will be Mr. Blaikie, Daniel's last day, and his family is here. Maybe it's nice to acknowledge that they're here. And maybe if he asks me a question, I'll say a few things about him. I'll just start with a few opening remarks. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to come before you and the members of the committee to discuss C-59 for implementing the full economic statement and also the main estimates.
Moment to pay tribute to the life of Brian Mulroney. And I want to recognize one moment in particular that was really meaningful to me and to many Canadians. In December 1991, the people of Ukraine voted overwhelmingly for independence in a national referendum. I was there as a reporter covering it. The day afterwards, Brian Mulroney, as Prime Minister of Canada, took the initiative and was the first Western leader to recognize an independent Ukraine. That was a historic act and a historic decision, it was a great thing he did for Canada. Depuis, le Canada et l'Ukraine ont tissé.
Since then, Canada and Ukraine have had close and important links that have been increasingly reinforced, especially today. We are standing side by side with Ukraine in their heroic and continuous struggle for democracy.
Of the Government of Canada, I would like to take this opportunity to extend my deepest condolences to the Mulroney family and to commemorate a truly great Canadian leader. Le projet de loi C-59 est...
So Bill C-59 is a central element of our economic plan to contribute to making life more affordable and build more housing and create good jobs from one coast to another.
Economic data. Inflation in Canada fell to 2.8% in February. That was down from 2.9% in January and down from its peak of 8.1% in 2022. Inflation has now been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 2 months in a row. That is good news for all Canadians and for all members of this committee. And earlier this month, DBRS reaffirmed Canada's AAA credit rating with a stable outlook. That's a powerful proof point of our government's fiscally responsible approach. All of this is progress, but we know that so many Canadians, especially young Canadians, are still struggling to make ends meet and to feel confident about their future. Our economic plan will change that, and that is why I'm so glad to be here to talk about C-59 and why it's so important to pass this bill into law. Voici certaines mesures importantes.
So here are some of the important measures in this bill, which I hope will receive support from the members. We're eliminating GST on new rental housing that's purpose-built for renting within the framework of admissible cooperative housing plans. And there are other measures that we've taken this fall to eliminate GST on new rental housing that is purpose-built for rental purposes.
By creating incentives for them to build more homes that would otherwise not move forward to construction. Nous apportons les modifications.
We're also bringing the most important changes in our generation when it comes to competition within Canada, and this will contribute to stabilising prices and enlarging the choices given to Canadians so that people can receive the support and the health care that they need. So we're deleting GST on counselling services and psychotherapy services.
Transformational investment tax credit for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and an investment tax credit for clean technology. These are the first two of our 5 major investment tax credits. It is absolutely urgent to pass these measures into law as soon as possible. Investors need that certainty. And we're supporting Canadian workers by linking these investment tax credits to historic labour requirements. They will give businesses an incentive to pay a prevailing union wage and to create apprenticeship opportunities. L'adoption du projet de loi C-59.
The adoption of Bill C-59 without further delay would mean that in the bill we can anchor these important investment tax credits and bring certainty to businesses who want to create well-paid jobs and attract more investment to Canada.
Bill C-59 presents real, concrete action to address the challenges that Canadians are facing. That is why I'm urging all MPs who are here to support the bill's swift passage. Je vous remercie et je serai maintenant heureuse de...
Thank you very much, and I'll be very happy to field your questions.
Merci, Minister Freeland. And now we will go to members' questions. In the first round, each party will have up to 6 minutes. We are starting with MP Holland, please.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, do you have faith in the Parliamentary Budgeting Officer?
Certainly, and I also have faith in the Calgary business community. I was in Calgary just 6 days ago, and I met with representatives of the oil and gas sector and of the renewable sector, and they told me specifically, get Bill C-59 passed now. We need those tax credits. I know you're an MP from Calgary, so I thought you'd like to know that.
Minister, do you believe in his economic and fiscal analysis of the impact of your carbon tax?
What I know, what study after study has shown, is that the price on pollution delivers, and our carbon rebates put more money in the pockets out of 8 out of 10 Canadians. For people in Alberta, the province you are so fortunate to represent, it's going to be $1,800 per family.
And what is the cost of the carbon tax every year if there's an $1,800 rebate?
The question that I think Conservatives need to answer is, what is the cost to Canada of not having an environmental plan, of not having a carbon plan? And I can tell you what that cost is. It is no inward investment. I was very glad, and no investment by Canada's own companies. I was very glad to be outside of Edmonton at the end of last year to announce the multi-billion-dollar Dow investment. And the CEO of Dow said it is thanks to Canada's pollution pricing system and our tax credits, 2 of which we're debating
Minister,
today, that they made that multi-billion-dollar investment that's creating jobs for people in Alberta.
I know Alberta speeding authorities know very well that you were in Edmonton last year as well. And according to your own environmental department, they said they don't track how much emissions are reduced by your carbon tax, so there's no actual data. But I'll ask you once again. You said that an average Alberta family gets $1,800 in rebates. How much is the cost to an average Alberta family, according to the PBO?
Let me quote an important document. Our plan will ensure that all Canadians can do their part to fight climate change in a way that works best for them at a carbon price that is increasing to $50 a ton. We will assess progress so carbon prices can be on a path to $170 a ton. I know those words are familiar to you, Mr. Halan, because they were in the Conservative 2021 election platform that you ran on. And so all of us here were elected, every single person here was elected with a commitment to put a price on pollution. That is something we all need to do because our economy needs it.
Minister,
investors
I just
require
ask
it.
for a number, and since you're not providing it, it's actually the cost is $2,900 to an average family, and according to you and the PBO, $1,800 is the rebate, which leaves Canadian Albertan families in the hole after your so-called phony rebates. Albertan families will pay more into it. Now, you're a member from Ontario. Can you tell us how much an Ontario family will pay into the carbon tax?
Mr. Helon, let me first take issue with the notion that there is anything phony about the $1,800 that Alberta families will be receiving this year. Those are $1,800 directly into the pockets, into the bank accounts of hardworking Alberta families. They will make a real difference to Alberta families. There is nothing phony at all about
Okay,
that.
I just need the number, Minister. How much does an Ontario family pay into the carbon tax?
Ontario families will be getting a rebate this year of more than $1,100, and that is also money directly into the pockets of Ontario families. And I can tell you something else.
So Minister,
the province
sorry,
of Ontario
I'll have to correct
is benefiting
you because I only have a
from
limited amount of time. An Ontario family will pay $1,600 into this carbon tax. They get a $1,000 rebate. So on average, they'll pay into this carbon tax scam $600. So I just wanted to clear that up according to the PBO. Also, I want to move on. Do you not agree with the 70% of Canadians and premiers, including a Liberal premier and other Liberal parties, that your carbon tax increase on April 1st should be paused, that there should be a spike on that hike?
So we're the Finance Committee. Precision in numbers is important. And let me just be precise that Ontario families this year will be getting $1,120 in an absolutely real rebate that is making a difference to them.
Not
and
according to the PBO.
The other thing that is making a difference to Ontario families is the fact that thanks to Canada's climate action policies, we are able to attract inward investment. The investments in EV plants by Volkswagen, by Stellantis, these are generational,
Minister, sorry,
they're
as I only have a
transformational,
limited
they
amount of
create
time,
tens of thousands of jobs, and those jobs are only possible because Canada has clean energy and an environmental plan.
Your government was lambasted by the OECD that your ranking for your climate action plan fell from 58th to 62 out of 67 countries on your climate change performance index. So we actually got worse. Another embarrassing stat for Canada under your government. And you want to continue to hit hard earning, suffering families right now that are going more into food banks with an increase on April the 1st of your carbon tax. Why are you more obsessed with this carbon tax than listening to 70% of Canadians who are finding it hard to feed themselves and their kids and heat their homes? Why will you not listen to them and just stop the tax on April the 1st and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide whether they want a carbon tax or not?
Minister, I'm going to need a really short answer. We are well over time, and then we got to get to our next member.
Well, let me just say the $1,800 Alberta families will be getting this year will make a real difference. And not having a climate plan means saying no to investment in our economy and to jobs for the future.
Minister, and now we're going to MP Zarowitz, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I want to say thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, for being here. Thank you, Deputy Minister Chris Forbes, for being here as well. As we all do, I'm constantly going out to the residents of my riding of Davenport, and I always ask them, what are your top priorities? And one of the postcards that came back to my office was housing, housing, housing. And did I say housing? And so I know that you mentioned in your opening remarks a few things about how housing is a core part of the fall economic statement. And I know that the fall economic statement includes significant funding to help get more homes built faster. But for the average person in my riding of Davenport, can you walk us through how the measures that we have in C-59 will speed up the construction of new homes, not only in Davenport but across the country?
Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Jarvis. Thank you, Julie. Daniel's children asked me where I live, so I can tell them I live in Toronto, and Julie, who just asked a question, her riding is right next door to mine. And I absolutely agree with your judgment about the priorities of your constituents. My constituents would say the same thing. It is housing, housing, housing. And that's one of the reasons that anyone around this table who purports to care about Canadians needs to act with alacrity to pass this legislation. In addition to the essential 2-teen clean tax credits, which actually are of particular value to Alberta, as I heard in Calgary 6 days ago. The fall economic statement included significant measures, and Bill C-59 will pass them into law to get more homes built faster. So here are some of the things that we're doing. The Housing Accelerator Fund, $4 billion. That is money to do deals with municipalities across the country. It's going to help build 100,000 homes. As you know very well, Toronto has a deal under that fund. Removing the GST from new rental housing, including in this bill cooperative housing corporations. So important. It's going to get more homes built faster. And I think all of us can support co-ops and what important permanently affordable housing they create and what wonderful communities they create as well. Investments in low-cost financing for rental construction. That is going to help build 30,000 more homes per year. And the apartment construction loan program, to which the fall economic statement added $15 billion, will help build another 30,000 homes.
So coming out of a global pandemic and the subsequent inflation, there are a lot of Canadians who are going to be renewing their mortgages, and rightly so. They're worried about the interest rates and whether they're going to be able to afford to pay their mortgage at the higher interest rates when they renew. I know that we've introduced a mortgage charter in the fall economic statement. Can you explain in plain language to the person in my riding of Davenport who might be about to renew their mortgage, how is this charter going to help Canadians ensure that they could renew their mortgage in an affordable way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to start where you started, Julie, because Canadians are really concerned about inflation and concerned about interest rates. And that's why I started with the good news that now for 2 months in a row, January and February, inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range. That is so important because interest rates are really high. And as inflation stabilizes in the Bank of Canada's target range, that can create conditions that make it possible for rates to come down. And that's why I emphasize that, because I know so many people are anxious. The mortgage charter is in place to give people some certainty, some relief, to know what they can count on when they talk to their financial institution about renewing their mortgage. Some of the things that people need to know is you can talk to your financial institution about a commitment that you do not need to requalify if you are an insured mortgage holder under the insured minimum qualifying rate. So you can switch lenders. That gives you more options and more opportunities. Fees and costs that would otherwise be charged for relief measures, mortgage providers have to waive those. And I really urge Canadians, have those conversations with your financial institutions. The mortgage charter requires them to be supportive of the needs of people who have their mortgages and who are challenged in this high interest rate environment.
And now to MP Samari, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Minister, Mr. Forbes, good morning, and thank you for being here. I'm going to start with one request and two questions I'm going to put to you right away. First of all, your request. Your department has given a table to the committee with the 83 billion for the green economy by programme. So we've got estimates by programme. I'd like to ask whether your department can transfer to us the estimates for these programmes by sector of activity, the sectors that are going to receive this. And then a second question right off the bat. This includes cities and municipalities and their groups. And there's a question of renewing the tax on gas. And there's no conditions because that would really slow down the process. So how would you respond to that issue? And then a second question refers to the cultural sector, which is very worried. The Canadian Council of Arts seems to be having to refuse nearly all of the projects. The festivals, the artists, music festivals, museums are really up in the air, wondering whether these programs are going to be renewed and adjusted to inflation. So what would be your response to them today?
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sainte-Marie. Thank you, Gabriel, for these questions. I'll try to answer these. First of all, we'd be happy to do that follow-up in terms of our investments in the green economy. I think it wasn't so much of a question, but thank you for underlining the investments that we're doing in this area. It's extremely important to make these investments, and that's why it's important to have a plan for the climate. If we don't have a robust plan, it will be impossible for Canada and for Quebec to actually attract investment. And we are bringing in that type of investment, so thank you for emphasizing that. And Bill C-59 is important because thanks to our investment tax credits, we'll be able to do this, and they're contained in this bill. Coming on to the two questions. First of all, on the municipalities aspect. That's a file that my colleague, Minister Fraser, is tracking closely, and also Minister Rodriguez is dealing with this for Quebec. We're aware of the fact that the date of 31st of March is coming up very quickly, but we have confidence that we'll be able to reach an agreement with Quebec. And then on the cultural sector, thank you also for that question. That opens a door to me to congratulate the creators in Quebec and Monia Chokri personally, because as you know very well, she won the award for the best foreign film at the Caesars. And I would advise all MPs to go and see this movie. It was astonishing work, and it talks about the importance of the cultural industry in Quebec and the significant support that we're giving to the cultural industry. This is an excellent film. It's an award-winning film, and it was created partially thanks to the support from Telefilm Canada. And recently, Pascal Saint-Onge, my colleague, announced renewal of the funding for Telefilm Canada, 100 million over 2 years. And there's another 100 to come. We understand the importance of culture for Canada and for Quebec. And to be quite frank, I am very, very proud of the creators coming out of Quebec. Thank you very much for that answer, and we'll await your recent or the upcoming announcements eagerly because people are very concerned. I'd also like to know whether you're going to announce the reform of EI in your next budget. That's been promised since 2015. And in the meantime, what are you saying to the forestry workers who were not able to work last summer and accumulate their hours for EI because of the many forest fires raging? Thank you for that question as well. The forestry industry is one of the main industries in Quebec and in Canada. We'll always be there for this industry and in particular for the forestry sector workers. As I hope you will understand, today I cannot make announcements related to the budget as such. But before rounding off, I'd like to thank you. I see that you like me, are wearing the colours of yellow and blue. And thank you also for your support for everything we're doing together to support the courageous people of the Ukraine. Thank you. We are certainly fully supporting them. Quebec and the National Assembly, there's consensus asking for a right to withdraw with full compensation for dental health insurance programs and possible medical insurance program. This was in Schedule G. Are you going to agree to their request? I have very good contacts and very good conversations, and I hope that they will agree with me when I say that I have a very good relationship with Éric Girard, the finance minister in Quebec. He's a very efficient counterpart. We have discussions on a very regular basis concerning on these questions related to healthcare. My colleague Mark Holland is working that particular file. We will continue to work on this in a collaborative way with the province of Quebec. At the end of the day, we have come up with a solution, for example, for daycares already. That was a good solution that worked for Quebec and for Canada. And I do hope and I have confidence that we will find a solution for these matters as well. Thank you very much for that, and thank you, Chair.
Now to MP Blakey.
Welcome back to committee, Minister. First of all, I'd like to echo the sense of urgency that Mr. Saint-Marie was giving to the need for comprehensive employment insurance reform. There's a lot of things that need to change and have been promised to change for some time. One small cost item, but I think high impact, of course, is the question of double stacking maternity and regular benefits that the Social Services Tribunal at one point did recognize as an instance of gender discrimination in the employment insurance system that has a disproportionately negative effect on women. In C-59, there is a small proposal for employment insurance change. Those are the measures related to the placement or arrival of children, and I think overall those are good measures. I'm aware that there are folks who are concerned that Indigenous peoples were not consulted and that there are unique needs within Indigenous communities around the placement of their children, and of course a lot of very legitimate historical concern about government making decisions about the placement of children and how that gets arranged without Indigenous peoples themselves being in the driver's seat. So I'm wondering if the government is prepared to consult on these measures even as they implement them, in case there are other changes that should come in the future in order to ensure that this new benefit under employment insurance is properly tailored to the needs of Indigenous communities as they take more control and ultimately all control, I hope, over their own children and where they end up when their parents aren't able to serve them in the ways that we would all hope.
Okay. Well, first of all, I hope you will not mind if I take a moment to say, Daniel, Mr. Blakey, Daniel, I think today is your last day, and I do really want to say how much I have not only enjoyed but benefited from working with you from your work on this committee and your work in Parliament. We have not always agreed on everything. But the things I was thinking today about this meeting of the committee, and I was thinking the things I really admire about your work are I always know that you are led by your values. When you make a point, when you push for something, it's because you really believe in it and you think it's good for your constituents and the people of Canada. I also appreciate that when we don't have exactly the same opinion, you're always prepared to listen carefully and with an open mind to another point of view. Sometimes you're persuaded, but even when you're not, you're a person who's prepared to think hard and roll up your sleeves and work hard to try to find some outcomes that can be win-win. And to me, that is the definition of a good legislator and a good public servant. I'm really sad that you're leaving this role in Ottawa, but I've had a chance to meet your beautiful family, and I think they will be very, very happy to see more of you. And I hope that in your new job, we'll have a chance to continue to work together. Premier Kinew, I think, is off to an outstanding start, as is my colleague, Minister Sala, and I look forward to keeping on working together. Okay, specifically, thank you for highlighting that EI measure. I think it's a good one. It's going to be important for the people it helps. To your point about Indigenous people, I think we all recognize that we have collectively a lot of work to do to be sure that the programs and the laws and the institutions of Canada support Indigenous people in the specific ways they need. We're trying hard. I think we are making progress and getting better, but I would never claim that all the work that needs to be done has been done. So I'll just say I hear you. It's something that we do think about, but I'll think about it some more having heard your question.
Thank you very much. I don't know how we're doing for time, Mr. Chair.
For a minute, yeah.
Okay. Along similar lines, I know you had talked in your opening remarks about some of the new investment tax credits. Obviously, New Democrats thought it was a priority to ensure that there were prevailing wage conditions and apprenticeship conditions attached to those investment tax credits so that the money that government will be investing in new greener technologies won't leave good union-paying jobs behind. Upcoming, as I understand it, is another investment tax credit, which is the clean electricity tax credit. That's at a rate of 15% for non-taxable entities. Some of those non-taxable entities include Indigenous-owned non-taxable entities, and we've been hearing feedback that differential is disincentivizing partnership with Indigenous communities on renewable energy projects. And so I wonder if you're aware of that concern, and if your government is looking at the possibility of ensuring that for Indigenous-owned non-taxable entities that rebate amount is the 30% that private companies are enjoying, as opposed to the 15% that was talked about in a previous budget, I think maybe the 23 budget.
Thanks for the question. Thank you for highlighting the labor requirements of the investment tax credits. It's a first in Canadian history. Thank you for your personal support of having them there. And I think it's a good opportunity for both of us to thank Canada's union leaders who did so much work with all of us to have those requirements there. When you started talking about the clean electricity tax credit, I thought you were already maybe wearing your new hat of the province of Manitoba, and you were going to talk about Manitoba Hydro, because there are some good conversations that we can have there. As you know, making non-taxable entities eligible for tax credits is a huge, big new thing that we have done with this suite of tax credits. And we've done it recognizing the huge need that Canada has to build and produce more clean electricity. But that was a very big step. And I think it's important for everyone to recognize how significant that is. Like you, I am a big believer in that a key part of reconciliation is Indigenous economic participation and Indigenous prosperity. And so I do think the issue you raise is worth keeping on, working on, and thinking about, while bearing in mind that non-taxable entities have a particular and different relationship to tax credits than taxable entities.
Thank you, MP Blakey. Members, I want to get through a second round, so we'll hold somewhat to the minutes. We've been letting things go a little bit longer, but we're starting with MP Morantz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, how much has the government collected in carbon taxes since you implemented it?
I didn't hear the last question. The
How
last
much has
part
the
of the question.
government collected in carbon taxes since it was implemented?
So thanks for the question, and it gives me an opportunity to be really clear about the price on pollution. This is revenue neutral. All
Sorry,
the money
Minister,
that is collected,
it was a pretty specific
all
question.
the money that is
Just the
collected
number, how much
goes back directly to Canadians.
I only have limited
That
time,
is
Minister.
the key point.
How much has your government collected in carbon taxes?
Also an opportunity for me to point out that Manitoba families will be getting $1,200 this year.
Again, Minister, if I could just have the number, how much have you collected in carbon taxes?
The key point, which Conservatives consistently are trying to keep from Canadians, is that the price on pollution is completely
Again,
revenue neutral.
Minister, it's a
the
very
money
straightforward
does
question.
not go
Canadians
in.
want the answer
The
to.
money
What is-
does not go into general
I just have
revenues.
limited
It is
time. I'm sorry,
returned
Minister.
to Canadians.
What is the dollar value of all carbon taxes collected since the tax was implemented?
The key point is that is money in the pockets of Canadians. For Manitoba families this year, it's going to be $1,200. That is making a real difference.
Just the number, Minister. How much has the government actually collected in carbon taxes?
As I said, the key point is it's all money that goes back to Canadians. It goes back to your constituents, my constituents, Daniel's constituents.
With the greatest of respect, it's not
Mr.
revenue
Halland's
neutral. In fact, the
It is
estimates,
revenue neutral.
no, the Minister, the estimates say that you refuse to answer with giving accurate information, Minister. The government's own financial documents, your main estimates show that you've collected $20.7 billion in carbon taxes and has only paid out $18.6 billion since the carbon tax took effect. Oh, your government has collected over $2 billion out of the pockets of Canadians since the tax was implemented that you have not paid back. That's from your own main estimate. So will you correct the record and
Mr.
admit
Morantz,
the truth?
no, it is 100% revenue neutral, and I'm
Are you
glad
saying the main estimates are wrong?
I am saying that that is money that is being held for small businesses, and small businesses will have good news soon because that money is going to be returned to them, as we have committed to from day one.
Okay. You know, you mentioned that Premier...
That's just
how
true.
much-
And I do want to thank Winnipeg's
Sorry,
own
it's-
Dan Kelly for the work that he's been doing with
well,
us
Dan,
on that.
Dan Kelly completely disagrees with you. But aside from that, you mentioned what a great job Premier Canoe is doing. You know, Premier Canoe, when he got elected, and he's an NDP premier, we disagree on many, many things, but he recognized that Manitobans are suffering with the high cost of living. You know the very first thing that he did when he got into office? He cut the provincial gas tax by 14 cents. And he said it's because Manitobans are having trouble affording just to live. Why are you increasing the carbon tax at the very time Canadians are experiencing an affordability crisis, unlike what Premier Canoe has done?
So there's a lot we disagree on, but I'm glad we can agree that Premier Canoe is off to an excellent start as
So
the
will
leader
you follow his
of
example
Manitoba.
then and pause the increase in the carbon tax?
One of the things I admire about his leadership is his commitment to a climate plan for Manitoba, because he knows that that is an essential foundation of
But why won't
attracting
you follow
investment
his example
and good
and
jobs
actually
in Manitoba.
take the jackboots off the necks of Canadians?
I must say that language is entirely inappropriate when we're talking about a democracy.
Well-
I began by talking about Prime Minister Mulroney and the exceptional courage he showed in recognizing Ukrainian independence. There are people in the world right now who do have real dictatorships oppressing them, like the people of Ukraine. And to use that language, talking about a government policy you disagree with, is entirely inappropriate and cheapens our discourse and our democracy.
There are 7 premiers who have now called on you, representing close to 25 million Canadians, who are asking you to stop this tax increase. Premier Ford has also reduced the gas tax in Ontario. Why are you increasing taxes on Canadians at the very time they need a break?
Let's be very clear. And your line of questioning actually helps to highlight this. The price on pollution is revenue neutral. Every single
not.
penny.
According
Yes, it
to
is.
your main estimates, it is
Every
not.
single penny goes back to Canadians, and the $2 billion that you have highlighted, that is money for Canada's small businesses, and Canada's
they've been
small
waiting 6
businesses
years for it, Minister.
will be getting
Small businesses.
that money back, and I look forward
When?
to announcement
What
in
date?
due course.
Thank you.
Morantz, and now we're going to MP Thompson, please.
Thank you, and welcome to Committee Minister. Mr. Forbes, good to see you back here. I'd like to begin by asking you what my constituents in St. John's East can expect from Bill C-59, and specifically around supports, and in particular supports for families and for parents.
Well, thank you very much for that question. Daniel, I hope you don't mind if I call you Daniel, especially since it's your last day. Daniel highlighted one of the measures that I am especially pleased that we together are able to support, and that is for adoptive parents, a 15-week shareable employment insurance adoption benefit. I know, like me, you're a mom, and I'm really glad that we're going to be able to support more families once we get this legislation passed. So let's do it. Something else that meant a lot to me, and I was glad that we were able to include, was a new paid leave for federally regulated workers to support women who have miscarried. I think for a long time, we didn't talk about miscarriage. We didn't recognize the pain that it causes women who miscarry. I know you're a nurse as well as a mother, and I think that it is high time for us as a society to recognize how physically hard a miscarriage is, as well as emotionally traumatic. And I'm glad that, again, once we get this legislation passed, so let's do it, we're going to be able to recognize the pain, the physical stress that of a miscarriage for a woman, and provide her with some support.
Thank you. And I will, you mentioned the nurse, I will stay in that track and lean into acknowledging.
And I bet you've heard from women that we don't support women enough when they miscarry.
And thank you for that. And I do believe that it's really quite a big step forward in acknowledging parental leave. But, you know, I want to also acknowledge the work government is doing on health care. And also the dental plan, which I think is incredibly important because it does acknowledge that oral care is health care. I realize it's for uninsured Canadians, but that does include seniors and vulnerable persons. Could you speak about the estimated number of persons who will be able to receive dental care through this program?
For sure, and I just want to offer one more health area support, which I touched on in my opening remarks, but I know you and I have talked about it, and I know it's important for your constituents, and that is lifting the GST, HST on psychotherapy and counseling. Always helpful for people to have access to psychotherapy and counseling, but we've been through some really hard times recently. And so I'm glad that we'll be able to provide that support too. Thank you for highlighting dental care. I don't know about other people here, but when I travel around the country, it is really striking to me how many people come up to me and they will say, I recently had this conversation in the youth council. A young teenage boy, young man on my youth council wanted to know when dental care would be available for his father's age group, because he said his dad was not, was suffering. And he said, I'd really like my dad to be able to go to the dentist and get taken care of. That really brought home to me how many Canadian families are really literally in pain because they don't have the money to go to the dentist or have to make difficult choices in their family budget. So good news, we're fixing that. So far, more than 400,000 children have been supported. Our estimate is that 9 million Canadians will be supported with dental care. And as you know, dental care is now being rolled out to seniors, with applications being rolled out to new age cohorts every month.
You want to make a final comment, but you were going to the next member, MP Thompson.
I was trying to get another question in, but that's fine. Thank you.
The time is done, and so we're off to MP Sainte-Marie, please.
Madame la Ministre, le journal...
Madam Minister, the Journal de Montréal today said an increase in 44% of firms that are declaring bankruptcy, and it says reimbursing the CEWS is the straw that's breaking the camel's back for several entrepreneurs who are preferring to give up. And later in the article, it says, in particular, firms that are facing bankruptcy has gone up by 44% in Quebec over the last year, with over 3,000 firms that have actually gone bankrupt in 2023. Now, it's predictable, and we've put forward solutions. What are you going to propose in terms of solutions to this matter? Thank you very much for that question. Our government very much understands the importance of SMEs. They are at the heart of our economy, and they're also at the heart of our communities. That is why we were so proud of being able to support SMEs with a program of $49 billion. It was really significant support, and it was vital support that was given. The reality is that over 80% of businesses have paid back their loans, and I'd like to thank all of the businesses who have done this. By doing that, then they freely received $20,000 in terms of federal government support. Once again, that's a big support. It's support that they deserve, and it's support that helped thousands and thousands of businesses right across the country to survive during the pandemic. Today, the good news is that businesses where it was difficult to actually pay back their loans, today they can continue with a federal government loan. They just have to pay 5% in terms of interest payments. It's really a very, very low level of interest compared to what's happening in private commercial institutions. SMEs do not have to pay back their loan to the federal government up until the end of 2026. So they have time to do this. They have time to reimburse this for the moment. They just have to pay the interest amount, which, as I've said, is at a very low level, in particular if we compare it with the private market levels. Thank you very much.
From MP Blakey.
Thank you very much. I wanted to take a moment, and I know there's certainly revenue ideas that New Democrats support that the government does not, but there are revenue items in Bill C-59, and I think whenever we're talking about the government books, it's important to talk not just about the spending side, but also the revenue side. And so I wonder if you'd like to take a moment to highlight some of the revenue measures that are here and some of the principles you think underlie those particular revenue items that might help inform future decisions about government increasing its revenue from those. You know, we're witnessing a time with giant corporate profits, record corporate profits. And certainly New Democrats feel it's appropriate that some of that profit be brought back into the system and invested back into people. So what are some of the principles underlying these revenue items that may encourage government to go further and ensure that corporate Canada is paying its fair share?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. And I feel, which is not something I anticipated today, that Premier Canoe is perhaps in the room with us already. No, really, I do. Because in my first conversation with him, he talked to me about how the economic horse has to pull the social cart. He said that he really supported the fiscal guideposts that we laid out in the fall economic statement, and that he shares our government's belief that a government that believes in supporting people, that believes in building up the social welfare net, is also a government that needs to believe in economic growth and in fiscal responsibility. And I know that that is the path that he has set Manitoba on. And I look forward to really working together with the province of Manitoba and, progressives across the country to, do things that help the economy to grow, allow us to be fiscally responsible, because that's what allows us to support Canadians. So I really just want to start with that and say how important it is. And I agree with you. If we want to support Canadians in a fiscally responsible way, we need two things. One is economic growth. And that's why, and here kind of setting aside the sort of ritualized jousting, I would say to our Conservative colleagues, please, gentlemen, get on board and support these investment tax credits. They really are measures that every single person who we care about really will benefit from. I am hearing from the oil and gas sector in Alberta that they want these tax credits to be passed urgently. Surely that is something that Liberals and Conservatives can agree we need to do. And the tax credits are an important part of this fiscally responsible approach because they allow us to drive investment, drive growth, create jobs. But the revenue side is also really important. And that's why, in our work together, we have been part of putting in revenue-raising measures like our luxury tax, like our COVID dividend, that we asked the financial institutions that benefited from our support during COVID to pay to support the budget. So those are important measures. I agree with you.
MP Blakey, and now we're off to MP Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here.
Back to the ritualized jousting.
Right, back. You know what? You should trademark that, honest to goodness. But that's great. I would like to actually talk about GDP per capita, but I think it's important that we get we come to an agreement, or that there's factual clarity with respect to what the PBO has recently told us, RE, the rebate versus the carbon tax. And so this will be, I guess, a little bit of ritualized jousting unless we can come to an agreement, which I'm hopeful we can. But in every one of the provinces, in a recent report from the PBO that I'm looking at right now, he says that where the backstop applies, that there is a net economic loss for families in every single one of those provinces. Can you just agree with that?
With true goodwill, and I do enjoy our conversations, I think you and I probably disagree on a price on pollution, or at least we disagree on it today. Because the thing that I would point out, to you, to your colleagues, is you guys ran in 2021 on a carbon price. I read out the quote from your platform to Mr. Halan, and you said there was going to be a carbon price that increases to $50 a ton and on a path to $170 a ton. I think the reason you said that, please enlighten me, but I think the reason you said it is because you understood in that campaign that Canada needs a credible environmental plan, a credible plan on climate to attract investment. And we are doing a great job in attracting investment to Ontario, working with the Ford government. VW, Stellantis.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you. I would just, provide the little bit of commentary that the OECD does predict us to be last in capital investment over the next 40 years. But I just want to go through this because I think it is important that we have factual clarity on this. And so the PBO tells us that the average family in Alberta will pay $2,943 in carbon tax. Could you please tell us what their average rebate will be for that family?
You mentioned the OECD, so I can't resist pointing out that according to the OECD, in the first 6 months of last year, of 2023, Canada had the highest per capita foreign investment of any country in the G7 or G20, and the third highest total sum of foreign investment. That is impressive. That is actually thanks to our collaborative work with the government of the province of Ontario, and it is thanks to the fact that we have a climate plan. Investors are demanding that.
Thank you very much. So what would be the rebate?
For our province, Ontario families, it's $1,120. For Alberta families, it's $1,800 this year.
Okay, and so for Alberta, they'll get a rebate of $1,800, but they're going to pay $2,943. For our province, the beautiful province of Ontario, they're going to get a rebate. I believe what did you say? 1,040. I've got 1,047, or it's 1,100.
I have 1,120.
Okay, fair enough. The amount they're paying is $1,674 there. So it's factually that Canadians are at a net loss because of carbon tax. That's the PBO. That's not us. I just want to get that clarity. I now want to move on to our GDP per capita, which I think is a pretty important issue here. And so this is the GDP per capita. The blue line is the United States over the last decade or so. The red line is Canada. And you see this gap appearing around 2014, 2015, and it's quite a large gap. And that's incredibly important. That's incredibly important because that underpins the economic well-being of every Canadian. And this gap is expanding. And so could you please tell Canadians why they are getting poorer while Americans are getting richer?
Point of order. Chair, I'm not sure if the rules here are the same as in the House, but my understanding in the House is that we're not allowed to use props, and so I just wanted to ask if you could rule on that.
We're going to just suspend, and I'll confer with the clerk and get back to you. And you will be our last questioner,
Point
MP
of order,
Weiler.
Mr. Chair. I won't speak anymore, but could you give the Minister 15 seconds to comment on that, please?
The Minister, if you'd like 15 seconds, and then we'll be going to MP Weiler.
I'll just say two things super quickly. We all want jobs and growth. The way to get jobs and growth is to pass Bill C-59. This includes essential ITCs, which, like, I was in Calgary last Friday. Industry leaders, Alberta industry leaders said to me, why the heck can't you get those measures passed into law? It makes me quite sad to say it's because of Conservative MPs that we can't do it. So let's just get together on this. Let's pass these measures.
And now to MP Weiler. And you'll be our last questioner, MP Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank the Minister for being here today to answer questions on C-59. And I do want to pick up on the last line of questioning. And thanks, Minister, for sharing the good news about the level of foreign direct investment that we're seeing in Canada right now, particularly in the battery supply value chain, where I know Bloomberg has rated Canada as the #1 country in the world for that as well. But unfortunately, we're not seeing that level of investment in all areas of our economy. So much of the discussion recently has revolved around the impact of the price on pollution on the cost of things like fuel and gasoline. But we know actually it's the price of the global price of energy, which has disproportionately impacted people. And there is not a rebate that's coming with that when the global price goes up. And it's the illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine that disrupted the energy market, which is really driving that. And so really that money is going into profit. And I saw a recent report that the 5 biggest oil and gas companies made almost $38 billion in profit in 2022. So it's great to hear that there is that companies in that sector are asking for us to move ahead with the carbon capture and storage investment tax credit in this with this measure. And so I was hoping you could share with this committee what you're hearing from those companies and how quickly they're ready to move on making those critical investments, which will drive jobs, create economic growth, and help reduce emissions from Canada's largest and fastest source of GHG emissions.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm not going to speak for them, but I will say, because they've been very clear publicly about this, if we want to get these projects built, which will reduce emissions and create great jobs at the same time, we need these tax credits passed into law. I think really there can be no excuse for delay. I think we need to act with alacrity. And I really would urge all MPs, but maybe particularly Alberta MPs, to join our government in supporting these historic job-creating measures that show that you can and you must have a climate plan and an economic plan at the same time. And the reality is the best economic plan is a climate plan, and the best climate plan is an economic plan. That is what these measures represent. I'm also really glad, Patrick, if I may, that you mentioned the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine as an economic issue. We've spoken about it earlier as a gross violation of international law, of sovereignty, of human rights. But this is also a war that has impoverished us all and driven up the costs for every single family in Canada. And that's why maybe towards the end of this testimony, it's a nice opportunity for me to highlight that as the Prime Minister promised on February 24th in Kyiv, Canada is supporting the brave people of Ukraine in their fight against Putin. That's a fight for the international rule of law, but it's also a fight for getting the global economy back to normal. It's a fight for people's pocketbooks. And I was really glad that our country yesterday was able to send $2 billion of support to Ukraine. The Ukrainians got it yesterday. And the Prime Minister got in touch with me to say, thank you very much. This is making a big difference.
Thank you for that. And I want to pick up just one last question in remaining time on the revenue driving side. And in C-59, we have legislation related to the digital services tax. And I was hoping you might be able to explain how this fits into our OECD Pillar 1 commitments to implement one multilaterally.
Yeah, thank you for that. Canada has been working assiduously with our international partners on the 2 OECD pillars. These are about fairness. These are about preventing a race to the bottom in global taxation. On Pillar 1 and on the DST, this legislation is important in moving forward with that. We always prefer a multilateral approach and a multilateral solution. And I have been having some good collaborative conversations about this with many international partners and specifically with Secretary Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury. And maybe this gives me an opportunity to give a final shout out to Chris Forbes, our Deputy Minister of Finance, because he and Team Finance at the officials level have also been having some good conversations with our international partners, very much including the U.S. on this issue. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. And thank you, MP Weiler. Thank you, Minister Freeland, Deputy Minister Forbes. And that is the hour that we had set for C-59. We are now moving to another study, which we have on main estimates, and you'll be here for the next half hour with us. So that will allow us to get through a new full round. So this will be the first round on this, or the round that we will be having. And so each party will have up to 6 minutes to ask questions, and we'll start with MP Howland, please.
It'll be MP Chambers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, you and I will agree on one thing. I think the officials at Finance are the absolute best in the entire public service. Very, very capable folks. And I appreciate your appearance earlier on C-59, and I'm going to try to bring the SUPS and the C-59 together a little bit, so if you'll indulge me. How many FTEs people will we hire as a result of C-59?
Thank you for the question, and it gives me an opportunity to highlight the work of Treasury Board and my colleague Anita Anand on bringing into action our refocused government spending initiative. I agree with you about the excellence of finance officials and the importance of a strong and effective public service. I also agree that it's important to be sure that we are carefully reviewing government spending, including on our public service, and that we're sure that it is effective. And that's why this exercise has been so important, and it's making a difference.
So I don't think you know, and that's okay. But every financial piece of legislation that's been sent to this committee, including all the budgets, we ask the same question: how many FTEs will be hired as a result? The departmental spending plans that are released every year consistently show that in the following year, full-time equivalents will drop by about 2% every year, except when that year ends and we get the updated report, in fact, FTEs have gone up. I'm not really sure, maybe it's Treasury Board issue or finance issue. It doesn't really seem like anyone's paying attention to a people plan, because every year we go up when the government's projections have gone down. And we see this in the underused housing tax. The underused housing tax, we thought, or you projected, would bring in $200 million a year in the first year, then $170 million every year thereafter. The numbers are in. Since 2022, the government spent $59 million in administration, including hiring 350 people. It has assessed only $49 million in penalties. That's assessed, not collected. In fact, it hasn't even started collecting any money yet. how has the government's projections been so far off on the underused housing tax?
There's a lot of different things mushed together there. But let me make some key points that matter for Canadians. First of all, I do actually share what seems to be your point, that it is important for government to be effective. And that's why our exercise in refocusing government spending for a total of $15 billion is a really important exercise, because it's important to show Canadians we are careful, and we think it is important to be sure that money is spent where it can be have the greatest impact for Canadians, for example, on things like dental care. Now, when it comes to our numbers and our projections, I made a commitment in the fall economic statement to hit some specific fiscal guide rails, and I will live by that commitment. Today is not the day that we're presenting the budget, but we are going to hit those guide rails. And just a final point here, I'm glad to hear you, Mr. Chambers, being keen for the government to raise more revenue.
Well, I'm actually asking
you and Mr. Blakey
Minister,
and I seem to agree that we need to have sufficient revenue to fund the things Canadians need.
Is it a good deal for taxpayers to spend $59 million in administration to collect far less than $59 million? Is that a good deal?
What I wonder is the Conservative Party now advocating for there to be empty homes all across Canada at a time when we have a housing crisis? Our government believes homes are for Canadians to live in. We are working hard to have more homes built faster, and we're also working hard to be sure that homes are not a financial asset.
Thank you very much,
They're for Canadians to live in. No,
thank you very much, Minister.
For making clear that the Conservative Party doesn't actually care about whether homes are for Canadians to live in. Does the Conservative Party not care if there are vacant properties across the country?
We're actually advocating for some common sense, and it doesn't sound like a very good deal for taxpayers.
Not caring for people to be housed.
Let's move on, shall we? Let's move on.
I can see why you would want to.
Miss Andre-Lise Mathot was appointed to the Infrastructure Bank by yourself in December 2022. You're well aware of the governance issues at SDTC, on which she was a board member. Just late last year, Ms. Mathot admitted that she was on the board and present when money was approved to go to 4 companies in which she held a financial interest. I'm just curious, why is this the kind of ethical standard that you expect your board members that you appoint? And have you asked her for clarification or to maybe resign her position from the Infrastructure Bank?
What we have seen consistently from the Conservatives is an attack on efforts by our government to drive investments into the Canadian economy, investments made
Minister,
by the
someone admitted to a very serious ethical breach and a conflict of interest.
Through our ITCs, and it would be great to see the Conservatives get behind
Minister,
these measures that
someone
will
has admitted
growth.
to a very serious ethical breach and a conflict of interest, who now is still on the board of the Infrastructure Bank and reports to you. You appointed that person. Do you still have confidence in her to perform her duties well?
Our government has been very clear about SDTC and the fact that what we saw happening there was unacceptable, and our government has taken action.
So you still have confidence in Ms. Mathot?
Thank you, Minister. We are well over the time, but we're going to MP Baker now.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair and Minister. Thank you very much for being here. Minister, I wanted to come back to the topic of the global implications and the implications on Canadians of the war in Ukraine. A moment ago, in response to Mr. Weiler, you spoke about the economic consequences of the war. You talked about the impacts on the global economy. We've had witness after witness, expert after expert, economist after economist come into our committee over the past couple of years and talk about how the war in Ukraine has been, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been one of the primary drivers of food inflation and energy inflation around the world that Canadians face at the grocery store and that they face at the pump when they go to fill up their car with gas. So it's touching Canadians economically every day, as you alluded to a few moments ago. But as you've heard me say in the House, it's also, I believe that Ukraine's victory is vital to Canada's security, and that's why we have, and I believe, all members in this House, and we need to support the Ukrainian people with what they need until they win, until they achieve a decisive victory. Traditionally, the issue of support for Ukraine has been unanimous in the House. I think traditionally, to be frank, traditionally political parties in Canada kind of trip over each other to try to show that they are the strongest supporters of Ukraine. I think recently we've seen that over the past year and a half, we've seen that unanimity erode. So can you explain to folks, to my constituents in Etobicoke Centre and just Canadians listening, the importance of supporting Ukraine?
Yeah, I can. And thank you very much, Ivana, for your question and your hard work. And I did start with a recognition of the historic role that Prime Minister Mulroney played when it came to recognizing Ukrainian independence. His funeral is on Saturday, and I think it's important that that aspect of his work be recognized by by Canadians. Ukrainians have recognized it. Actually, the Bloc, I don't know if Gabrielle is still with us, in the Bloc's tribute to Prime Minister Mulroney, one of the things that was mentioned is that he was awarded the Order of Yaroslav Mudry, Yaroslav the Wise, by Ukraine, and that is in recognition of his historic role. He called me up right after the war started, and he reminded me of his role. He told me the whole story. He was with President Bush. And President Bush wasn't so keen on Canada to come out so strong and so early recognizing Ukraine, but he did it anyway. I respect him for that. And then he said to me, you know what? Canada has always supported Ukraine. And I'll use slightly unparliamentary language because I'm going to quote the former prime minister. He said, you goddamn well better do everything you can. Make sure you do. And I do want to say, I think that Mr. Chambers was maybe a staffer in Harper's government. I don't know if that's true. And I do remember conversations with Mr. Harper about support for Ukraine. He was also a Canadian prime minister who supported Ukraine. I do actually really sincerely hope that today's Conservative Party finds its way back to the traditional cross-party support for Ukraine that we have enjoyed in this House. It's a question of democracy versus dictatorship, and it's also a question of the pocketbooks of Canadians. Because as long as Vladimir Putin is able to wreak havoc, that causes real problems for the global economy and for Canadians.
Thank you, Minister. I believe I have about a minute and a half, Chair. Minister, I'm going to change topics here, if I may. We know that the main reason, we've heard this from expert after expert have come to our committee, the main reason that housing prices in Canada are so high is because of a shortage of housing supply. And so bottom line is we've heard person after person come into the committee and say we need to build more housing, we need to build it quickly, and they've given us advice on how we should do that. Could you speak to how the government is working to increase housing supply across the country with the goal of making housing more affordable for Canadians?
Of course. I do think that housing is the central challenge in Canada right now. That's one reason we shouldn't have underused housing in Canada, and we shouldn't have homes lying empty when Canadians need homes. And it would be good if the Conservatives shared that view. What we also really need to do is get more homes built faster. And we're doing a lot to make that happen. I've talked about the Housing Accelerator Fund, that we have deals in place for the whole fund as it currently exists. That's going to get 100,000 more homes built. We have topped up the apartment construction loan program with $15 billion. There's now a total of $40 billion in that program. That will get 100,000 more homes built. We have lifted the GST on purpose-built rental, and in this measure, we will lift the GST from new co-op housing developments. Really, really important. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, which was mentioned earlier today, does have a role to play too in getting the infrastructure built that we need to get more homes built. And I do just want to offer a factual correction to, maybe I'll be generous and say, a misunderstanding that seemed to be underlying some of the Conservative questioning. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, of course, is the responsibility of the Minister for Housing and Infrastructure. It's not part of the finance responsibilities.
Thank you, Minister.
MP Baker, and now to MP Samari, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I very much enjoyed this exchange on the interests of the Ukrainian people and that we need to fight for them too. Now, on the question of housing, I'd like to talk about access to property. Here we're in a dramatic situation. Interest rates remain high, even if the mid-term prospects are more encouraging. But over and above that, the price of property is continuing to rise. So it's a whole generation who's not able to buy a condo or a home or have access to property. There was the first home buyer savings account which has been set up, but it hasn't turned things around. So, Madam, what are you going to say to that generation, Finance Minister, and what are you going to do? Gabriel, sincerely, thank you very much for that question, because I believe that you've really hit the nail on the head there. That's the most important issue. We've discussed lots of important matters today, but this question for me really is the key question, the most important one. Access to housing for young people and access for those who wish to buy a property. So having the possibility to be able to buy a property, I think that's extraordinarily important. We need to ensure that Canada is a country and Quebec is a province where if you work hard, if you've got a good job, then it should be possible for you to buy a home. That is why we have set up the first home buyer savings account. So it's tax-free. That helps you to buy this first property. It's working. There's over 500,000 accounts that have been opened since April last year when this was first launched. So we can see that there's a real desire for young people to buy this first home. So that's why we created this new tax-free savings account for them. But I agree with you that we still have work to do on this. And we have to continue to build and build more homes. But at the same time, we have to come up with creative, innovative solutions so that we can really allow young people who want to do so to be able to buy their first home. I really think that's fundamental to give them hope and give them confidence in our society. So thank you very much for that question. I'd like to reassure you that we are certainly working in that direction, and we understand that there is still plenty of work to be done. Thank you very much for that. Now, on another subject. There was a request from the Bloc to not create two classes of seniors. There was an increase in the OAS as of 75 years of age, and we're asking for this to be as of 65 years of age. And my colleague Adrienne Larouche has brought forward C-319 that deals with this. That was the aim, and it was supported in second reading, and it left the committee with unanimous consent. All parties, all MPs from all parties voted in favour of this bill. So is the government currently examining this bill C-319 to increase the OS pension as of 65 years of age? And do you agree with the unanimity expressed by the legislators? And would you be able to support this also? Thank you very much for that question, and thank you for your work on this particular file, the work accomplished by the bloc. I think that all of us around the table understand the importance of being certain that seniors in Canada and seniors in Quebec actually are able to have a decent, safe retirement with dignity. They're our parents, our grandparents. They're the people who have built our country, and they need to have a decent retirement with dignity. That is why we have added in extra support for the most elderly parts of the population, because we understand that they have more costly, more expensive needs. That is why I'm happy to see that we've increased support for that age group. And now we're adding in more support for them with the dental benefit. Joanne mentioned that earlier. And we've started once again with the most elderly parts of our population because specifically we understand that they need more support. Thank you very much for that. Now on another subject to round off. This doesn't affect many people. It's a small detail, if you like, if we put it within the context of the whole economy and of these sectors of activity, but it would make a big difference. And here I'm referring to artisanal producers based on maple sugar or small fruit. Because of the WTO attack from Australia on wine and the question of how to define wine, we've been able to exclude the cider and the producers, but all the other producers that were not actually covered by the action brought in the WTO, for example, such as pear cider or raspberry wine. These small producers are niche producers, and they have to pay the full excise tax, and it's really having a big impact on their competitiveness and even affecting their survival. So could you look at that in your department and try and harmonise excise tax to do the same thing as with cider producers?
And I need a very short answer, Minister, before we go to our final questioner.
Alors, well, because of what our chair has just said, I will just say that I'll follow up on this and we can talk about it afterwards. Thank you so much.
And now to MP Blakey. I said our final questioner, and then I'll ask members, I guess, if we'll have UC to have a question from MP Maurice. Yeah, okay. MP Blakey.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that jumps out in the estimates, I think, is if you look at the voted program expenditure in 22-23, the expenditure was $329 million. The budgeted amounts in 23-24 are $128 million. The expenditures to date are $420 million. The budgeted amount for 24-25 is $145 million. This kind of brought me back to my early days as Treasury Board critic. I suspect part of what's going on is that the main estimates in the budget are very poorly aligned because the budget tends to come out after the main estimates. So you end up with these irregularities where, what actually ends up being spent out of the estimates and voted authorities really doesn't look a lot like what's projected when the government tables its main estimates. And when we had a fair bit of debate around the Government Operations and Estimates Committee table in the 42nd Parliament on these matters, I mean, I think there was an impression, and I think even then Minister Bryson and President of the Treasury Board at that time had a strong feeling that until there was a fixed budget date, it would be very hard to bring the main estimates and the budget into any kind of meaningful alignment. You needed that for the predictability of the budget, and of course that didn't have to be a particular day, but it could be a window within which a budget would be presented, and that would also facilitate some important and better, frankly, than the current culture, collaboration between Treasury Board and Finance on the budget. I'm not saying there isn't any, but I understand that that there are nevertheless some internal barriers there, and the end result is that it can be very hard to make sense of the government's financials is between the estimates and the budget. So I wonder what your experience in this regard is, and if you would consider trying to move towards, if not a fixed budget day, then at least a fixed budget period, so that we might have a better alignment between the government's budget and the government's estimates, both so that parliamentarians can do their job of financial accountability better, but also that Canadians can more easily and readily understand what government proposes in its financial documents.
Okay, look, thank you for the very thoughtful question. And it's nice to have Scott's name evoked here. I guess a friend of both of ours, and I think an excellent parliamentarian. And an excellent president of the Treasury Board. I know you didn't mean anything by this, but I do have to make very clear we work so closely with the Treasury Board. When you said that, Chris was nodding his head because he and the Deputy Minister for the Treasury Board spend, I guess, half of their time together. So I do want to assure people there's incredibly close collaboration. We're in the same building. We're constantly working closely together. And I do just also want to say, by way of offering some certainty to the folks back home, we did quite intentionally publish those fiscal guardrails in the fall economic statement, and I do want to take this opportunity to say to people we're going to stick to them. So in terms of kind of certainty about numbers, I think better is always possible, and I think finding ways to do our work more collaboratively and effectively is a good idea. What I will say, though, Daniel, and since this is your last day, I'll be super frank and super candid. This does not seem to be a moment in the political life of Canada when the focus of debate in our parliament or our parliamentary committees is principally on ensuring that we have a better functioning government and is a sincere search for truth and collaborative work to improve how we operate. Ritualized jousting seems to be more what is going on. And, you know, insofar as that, I guess, provides bread and circuses, then I guess fair enough. And I accept the antagonistic, well, not the antagonist, the adversarial nature of our democracy. It's how it's set up. But I will say really, really sincerely, when it makes me mad is when that kind of ritualized jousting actually acts to stop Canadians from getting what they need. And I particularly, like these investment tax credits, I really believe in them. I really believe we need those measures to be in place so we can get investment into Canada. When you're back in the province of Manitoba, you're going to be calling me up and yelling at me and saying, why are these not passed into law? Investors are talking to me and they need them to be passed so that they can invest. That's what I heard in Calgary last Friday. And I would just urge us to just, you know, by all means, yell as much as you like at the government during question period, if that is what you enjoy. But the things that people actually need, let's pass them.
was impressed by Minister Bryson for was his mastery of the clock at committee. But I do, in all of that, thank you for that. But I wonder if we could just come back to the question of humoring a fixed budget date or period, because I really do feel so. And I'll give you an example. There's a lot of concern, and New Democrats are very concerned. It's why we're raising it in the House. We're raising it at every available table about cuts to Indigenous Services Canada. And we've seen a lot of stories about cuts to Indigenous Services Canada coming. Part of that is based on a detailed, look at the estimates. And of course, the estimates don't represent what may be coming in the budget because we have misalignment. To the extent that government may actually choose to renew some of the sunsetting funding, but won't or can't announce that until the budget, it's causing considerable existential angst for organizations like the National Aboriginal Capital Commission Association, or NACA. I hope I got the acronym, the long title right. And I'm thinking of some other programs as well around Indigenous languages. I mean, so to have, and I get that it feels a bit like navel gazing, and maybe I'm being a little indulgent on my last day, but these financial processes have real consequences for those organizations that make a real difference in the lives of Canadians. And so for something I think is relatively simple, albeit I've used that in the term for, around Parliament Hill and in government departments, as coming to an understanding on a relatively fixed period for when a budget would be presented could make a big difference in averting the stress, anxiety, and departure in some cases of staff that organizations experience because we can't get our financial process right. So I do think this is really about people, and it's why I'm hoping to hear that there's a meaningful openness to trying to get this process better.
Okay, thank you, MP Blakey. And in the spirit of Scott Bryson, and time, Minister, a very short answer, and then I'll see if we have UC just for MP Morris to have one question.
So process matters. Better is always possible. And since you specifically mentioned anxiety and reconciliation, Indigenous issues, let me just be really clear that reconciliation is a priority for our government and will continue to be.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Blakey. And now, do we have UC for MP Morris? Yeah. Minister, one question from MP Morris there.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. On that last question from Mr. Blakey, Greens strongly support many of the investment tax credits being proposed for clean tech, for example, with the labor requirements that are a part of that. What we are quite concerned and don't share your enthusiasm, Minister, for is the new subsidies for carbon capture. Because we know that evidence shows around the world that more often than not, this is a technology that often emits more carbon than it captures. And we know that the PBO now has put out a report that shows that these investment tax credits for carbon capture amount to a $5.7 billion subsidy on an unproven technology that in many cases is going to the oil and gas industry. I understand they've been in touch with you advocating for it. They've also been making $38 billion in 2022 alone. That's money we could be putting into replenishing the Greener Homes grants, for example, where in Ontario, folks in our communities can no longer apply. And so, Minister, I wonder if you're open to revisiting the evidence on carbon capture and reallocating those funds towards the solutions that we need to be investing in so urgently.
Well, first of all, thanks for being here at committee. And I do want to recognize you and our friend Elizabeth for your steadfast and pioneering championing of the environment. Now more than ever, we need voices in Canada that recognize the importance of having a robust climate agenda. And I do think, as I said earlier in my testimony, it's so important for those of us who recognize how important a climate agenda is to also be clear with Canadians that it is a false choice to say to Canadians, you have to choose between climate action and an economic plan. In fact, the opposite is the case. You cannot have an economic plan without a climate plan, and you can't have a climate plan without an economic plan. And today, more than ever, those two go together. And I know you agree with that, and I do want to thank you for your work and your advocacy there. And I think all of us who believe what I have just said, et j'inclus Gabriel, nous devons travailler plus fort.
We have to work harder than ever to bring this services to the Canadians.
On CCUS, I think this is a specific area where you and I are going to have to agree to differ. Our government does believe that this is an important path to reducing emissions. That's why we have proposed those tax credits. And actually, that's why I would say maybe this is an area where we could conclude today's discussion by actually having agreement with another set of members of Parliament who are present here. And I really do hope, since I think I cannot count on Mike's support for these measures, maybe I can count on the support of the Conservative MPs to get these passed into law soon.
It's not like religion to choose to believe in.
MP Morris, and we want to thank Minister Freeland, Deputy Minister Forbes for coming before our committee on C-59 as well as the main estimates. We appreciate the time and the many answers to the many questions that were posed here today. Okay, we'll allow the minister to depart. Thank you very much. I did see MP Blakey's hand was up, and yeah, and then I've got MP Lawrence. Yeah.
I know earlier that I think there had been some agreement.
30 seconds to get out of here.
Sorry, I'm all business. I'm all business.
Things to do,
I'm all
man.
business.
You got to help Premier out there in Manitoba.
I'm all business.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. Take your time.
Big carry bag or anything?
No, I used to be.
Then MP Lawrence, then MP Samari.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think there was agreement by the committee to return to Mr. Baker's motion once we had formulated the amendment in writing, and I believe that's done. Although I've of course been paying more attention to the proceedings than to my phone. But given that I think that is done, I wonder if the committee would want to return to that and then return as well to
I'm just going to interject there. So yeah, so we would need this for you to move a motion to reintroduce debate so we can get back to those two. Yep. Okay,
I'm getting
great.
to it. I'm sorry. I'm not quite as efficient as you would like, but I am getting there. So so I would simply move that we return to consideration of Mr. Baker's motion now that we have those items prepared, and that subsequent to that we return to my own motion that that we had to stop debate on in order to hear from the minister. Thank you.
MP Blakey, I've got MP Lawrence, and then MP Samari.
Thank you. Yeah, in the interest of time, Conservatives would be agreeable to passing both motions on division.
Right, good to know. Okay, thank you, MP Lawrence, for that, and MP Samari.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support Mr. Baker's motion as drafted, and I'd like to let you know that our clerk, Mr. Roger, forwarded to you an amendment I will bring to Daniel's text, Daniel's proposition, where he refers to a national school food program. The amendment is going to be about adding, in brackets, with right of withdrawal and full compensation for Quebec. If it is okay for Daniel and for all others, I would be supporting that, and I'll also support Daniel's proposal. Thank you.
Okay, I'm waiting to hear. MP Samari, thank you for that. Any discussion on that? Yeah, MP Blakey?
I think we could pass the amendment on division, but that we should have a recorded vote on the motion.
Okay. Members, yep.
On the, on mine, yeah.
Okay.
I know, but, you know.
So
trying to do
recorded
my
vote
duty.
has been asked for. Do you have any discussion?
Yeah, so I have a question
Yeah, a
for
question.
Monsieur Saint-Marie on his amendment. Monsieur Saint-Marie, je demanderai simplement.
Mr. Samari, I'm just going to ask the following. I'm trying to understand the amendment and what it means for Daniel's motion. Could you explain to us why you're proposing this change and what the effect of it would be? Mr. Chair, can I respond? I will take that as a yes. So the impact would be the following, because education is Quebec's jurisdiction. It's a provincial jurisdiction issue, so we would like to keep jurisdiction for Quebec and just add that if there is to be a national school food program, a Canada-wide program, just to make sure that Quebec can have its own program with the amounts that go with that. Just to add that part. That's the sort of amendment that we bring forward as the Bloc Québécois quite often. Thank you.
So from a process perspective, I'm comfortable with what's been proposed. I would need a moment on Mr. Blakey's motion and the amendment. I would need a moment to confer with my colleagues. So I would ask, if possible, that we suspend to have that discussion.
MP Baker, did you need any more time?
No, I didn't need more time. I just wanted to. My understanding is we were going to start with the motion, the procedural motion that I had.
I think yours passed already. Yeah, on division. Yep. So yours is done, and then we are on the amendment. Yeah.
So
and,
I'd just like to request there may be debate. I appreciate that, but I wanted to request a recorded vote on the amendment.
Okay, so that's where we are right now. I don't know if does anybody else want to speak to this? Yes? Okay, MP Blake.
Put on the record on behalf of New Democrats, I think our concern about withdrawal with full compensation with no further talk about the importance of, when we know that 800,000 Quebecers have been using a food bank in the last year, for instance, that there would be no talk about enhancing an existing program within Quebec, I think is a challenge. We do want to see those investments also come to Quebec to benefit children at schools through a nutrition program, which is why I'll be voting no to the amendment.
Anyone else before we go to the vote? No? Okay, clerk.
Mr. Baker.
This is on the amendment, clerk, is that right?
This is on the amendment. Yeah.
I vote no.
Madame Lapointe.
Contre.
Mr. Weiler.
Against.
Ms. DeBruson.
No.
Ms. Thompson.
No.
Mr. Chambers.
Oui, pour mon ami.
Mr. Hallan.
In favor.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Morans.
Yes.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
Oui.
Monsieur Blakey.
No.
Yes pour 5-5, nays contre 6-6.
Okay, it doesn't pass. So now we are back to the
debate on the main motion.
Yep, the debate on the main motion. If there is any further debate.
Request a recorded division,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So I don't see anybody else to speak, so we'll go again to a recorded division is what actually MP Blake has asked for. Everybody is good with that? Okay.
Mr. Baker.
No, he wants a recorded, yes.
In favor.
Ms. Lapointe.
Oui.
Madame DeBruson.
Oui.
Mr. Weiler.
In favor.
Ms. Thompson.
In favor.
Mr. Chambers. No. Mr. Hallan.
Against.
Mr. Lawrence.
No.
Mr. Morans.
No.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
Oui.
Monsieur Blakey.
Oui.
Yes pour 7, nays contre 4.
Okay, passes. Okay, so that is it, members. Shall we adjourn? Yep.
Yes.
We're adjourned.